I asked my husband for a divorce because my friends always date men with money, and I wanted to try that life. But when I came back 2 years later, he already has a girlfriend and doesn't want to leave her for me. I'm told even our children love her more than me. It can't be. I've always known that I was meant for more than just a suburban existence with a man who thought a big night out was a chain steakhouse and a movie. My group chat was a constant stream of inspiration, filled with girls who were actually living the soft life aesthetic that I was only pinning to my private boards. They were constantly posting from the backs of town cars, showing off unboxing videos of gifts they didn't even have to ask for, and dating men who understood that a woman's presence is a luxury that must be funded. Every time I scrolled through TikTok, the high-value woman coaches were speaking directly to my soul, telling me that if my man wasn't providing a princess treatment, I was essentially rotting in a low-frequency marriage. I looked at Mark, and all I saw was a man who was stable, which is just a polite word for stagnant and mediocre. I felt like my youth was being drained by the mundane tasks of motherhood and a budget-conscious lifestyle while other women were being manifested into private jets and five-star resorts. It wasn't that Mark was a bad person, but he was vibrating at such a low level that he was dragging my entire aura down with him. I started to resent the very sight of him coming home from his 9 to 5 smelling like corporate effort instead of old money and prestige. My friends would send me screenshots of their allowances from their providers, and I would look at our joint savings account and feel a physical wave of nausea. The algorithm kept showing me that I was a prize, a literal goddess who deserved to be draped in designer silk, not someone who spent her Saturdays at a crowded park. I convinced myself that the only reason I hadn't reached my peak aesthetic was because I was tethered to a man who didn't understand the provider mindset. I needed to break the soul ties that were keeping me in this middle-class purgatory if I ever wanted to step into my true opulent power. The day I sat Mark down to tell him we were over, I felt like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders, almost as if the universe was exhaling with me. I told him quite clearly that we were simply on different frequencies and that I had outgrown the partnership model for something more aligned with my feminine energy. He looked at me with this pathetic, confused expression, asking about the kids and our life together, but I just couldn't deal with that kind of heavy, negative energy. I explained that I needed to find my true provider and that staying would be a disservice to my personal growth and my glow-up journey. I walked out of that house with my suitcases and a vision board, fully expecting the world to bend to my will the moment I was legally single. I truly believed that once I was unplugged from the matrix of a boring marriage, the billionaire of my dreams would just appear in my DMs. The reality of the single market was quite frankly a total scam and a glitch in the spiritual system I had been studying. I moved into a cramped studio apartment that was impossible to make look aesthetic, no matter how many pampas grass arrangements I bought from Amazon. The men I met weren't providers at all. They were mostly low-effort narcissists who treated me like a disposable weekend accessory rather than a high-value queen. I spent 2 years exhausting myself trying to curate a life on Instagram that looked expensive, using old photos and clever angles at hotel lobbies just to keep up appearances for the group chat. My bank account was constantly in the red because being a wannabe luxury influencer is incredibly expensive when no one is actually footing the bill. I kept waiting for the manifestation to kick in, but all I got were situationships with guys who expected me to split the bill for coffee. I eventually had to admit to myself privately, of course, that the soft life was a lot harder to achieve when you're paying for your own maintenance and rent. I started looking back at my life with Mark, not with love, but with a realization that I had miscalculated the timing of my exit. I decided it was time to reclaim my spot and return to the home I had built, assuming Mark would be exactly where I left him, lonely and waiting for my light to return. I didn't even call ahead because I figured my energy would be enough of a notification that the queen had returned to her throne. I drove to our old neighborhood, rehearsing my speech about how I had healed and was ready to bless him with my presence again. I expected to find a man who looked broken, someone I could easily manipulate back into a state of gratitude for my return. When I pulled up to the driveway, the first thing I noticed was that the house looked different, almost like it had been filtered in real life. The peeling paint was gone, the landscaping was professional and lush, and there was a high-end European car parked where Mark's old sedan used to sit. I walked up to the door, my heart racing with a mix of entitlement and a strange sense of competition. I hadn't expected to feel. When Mark opened the door, my jaw nearly hit the designer imitation sandals I was wearing. He looked incredible fit, tanned, and wearing clothes that actually cost more than a week's salary, looking like the provider I had always demanded he become. He didn't look happy to see me. He looked bored, like I was an unwanted pop-up ad on a high-speed browser. Before I could even launch into my "I've returned to heal our union" monologue, a woman appeared behind him, looking like she had stepped right off one of my Pinterest boards. Her name is Elena, and she was wearing a silk lounge set that I had been eyeing for months but couldn't afford. She had this calm, centered energy that made me feel like an intruder in my own life, which was incredibly disrespectful considering I'm the mother of his children. The way she placed her hand on his arm was so possessive, like she was claiming the version of Mark that I had spent years trying to manifest. It was clear that Mark was doing significantly better financially, and it felt like a personal insult that he had reached this level of success only after I left. It was as if he had been holding back his abundance just to spite me, and now this placeholder was reaping the benefits of my absence. I stood there in the entryway, feeling the vibes of the house shift into something hostile and cold, despite the expensive candles burning on the marble console table. Mark didn't even invite me past the foyer, standing there like a bodyguard protecting his new polished reality from my chaotic presence. I tried to bring up the kids, hoping to use them as an emotional leverage point to get inside, but he just checked his watch. He told me the children were busy and that any visitation needed to be handled through the proper channels, which is just code for him being difficult. Seeing Elena standing there, literally wearing my energy and living the lifestyle I had scripted for myself, was a complete ego collapse. I left that porch feeling like the universe had made a massive clerical error, leaving me in a studio while my mediocre ex lived my dream with a stranger. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says you literally walked out on your kids because a TikTok told you to. You didn't choose yourself. You abandoned your family for a hashtag, and now you're mad someone else did the work you refused to do. Oops reply, I was choosing my mental health and my frequency. You can't pour from an empty cup, and my cup was bone dry in that marriage. Anonymous user 2 says you only want him back because he's fit and rich now. If he was still stable and mediocre in your eyes, you'd still be chasing providers in your cramped studio. Ops reply, no, Mark and I have a soul bond that can't be broken by a temporary replacement like Elena. I'm simply trying to restore the natural order. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the energy around this situation is becoming increasingly toxic and difficult to navigate. I decided that I needed to approach Mark when he was vulnerable, so I looked up the kids' soccer schedule, which I had to find online because Mark is gatekeeping our children. I showed up at the practice field wearing a carefully curated soft girl outfit, hoping to project a vibration of peace and maternal longing. I had even memorized several feminine energy scripts from a life coach I follow, focusing on being soft, vulnerable, and mentioning how much inner child work I've done. When I saw Mark dropping them off, I intercepted him before he could get back to his car, putting on my most healed and soulful expression. I told him that I had been doing a lot of shadow work and that I could see now how my departure was just a spiritual detour. We both needed to grow. He just looked at me with this completely blank, deadpan expression that felt like a direct attack on my aura. I was speaking from the heart about our divine masculine-feminine balance, and he just crossed his arms, looking more like a wall than a soulmate. When I finally paused for a meaningful silence, he just sighed and said, "Chloe, the divorce papers were the best gift you ever gave me." I felt like I had been physically slapped by his words. How could he be so ungrateful for the years of energy I poured into him? He didn't even acknowledge the healing I've been doing, showing a complete lack of emotional intelligence and spiritual awareness. It was so incredibly low vibe of him to dismiss my growth as if it meant nothing in the grand scheme of our twin flame journey. Just as I was about to correct his narrative, a brand new luxury SUV pulled up, the exact model and color I've had on my digital vision board for the last 3 years. It was Elena, looking disgustingly glowy and put together, even in casual athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My heart dropped into my stomach when I saw my son run toward the car, a giant smile on his face that he never had for me. He didn't even look at me standing right there. He just shouted, "Lenny!" and jumped into the passenger seat like she was the one who gave him life. It felt like a massive glitch in the Matrix. A moment where the reality I had scripted for myself was being played out by someone else. Seeing her in that car, my car, was the ultimate sign that the universe was testing my resolve in the most cruel way possible. I stood on the sidelines of that soccer field, feeling completely invisible and de-manifested as they drove away together. The irony of the situation is almost too much to bear. I was the one who studied the manifestation techniques, yet she is the one reaping the material rewards. Mark didn't even look back at me as he walked to his own car, leaving me standing there in the dust of the soft life I was supposed to be living. I spent the rest of the evening crying and looking at my old vision boards, wondering where I went wrong in my scripting process. It's clear that Mark is using Elena to project a successful image to hurt me, which is a classic narcissist move to lower my frequency. I won't let them win though. I know that my main character energy will eventually prevail over their rebound storyline. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says your son calling her Lenny says everything you need to know about who showed up for him while you were busy healing in a studio apartment. Kids know who actually loves them and who just wants a photo op. Ups reply they're being manipulated by material things. Children are easily bought with toys and luxury SUVs, but a mother's soul bond is eternal. Anonymous user 2 says the irony of her driving your vision board SUV is absolute peak comedy. You manifested the life, you just forgot to mention you wanted to be in it. Ups reply Mark was clearly holding back his potential while we were together, but that potential was built on my energy, so it technically belongs to me. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and I decided that subtle energy shifts were no longer enough to reclaim what is rightfully mine. I realized that if I wanted to reclaim my territory, I had to be bold and take up space in the home that I still technically consider my spiritual sanctuary. I didn't bother asking for permission because I still have a key that I forgot to return, which I took as a sign from the universe that I still belong there. I chose a Tuesday night, figuring a family dinner would be the perfect setting to re-establish my presence as the matriarch. I let myself in through the side door, expecting to find chaos that only a true mother could fix, but instead the house was eerily peaceful. The scent of expensive oud candles and high-end cooking filled the air, making me feel like a stranger in a space I used to curate. I walked into the kitchen and found the 4 of them laughing over a meal like some Pinterest-perfect family advertisement. The house has been completely renovated, new white oak floors, designer furniture, and custom cabinetry that I had begged Mark for during our marriage. It was infuriating to see that he suddenly had the abundance to provide these things now that I wasn't there to enjoy them. Elena was standing at the stove, looking way too comfortable in my kitchen, wearing a linen apron that looked perfectly aesthetic. She didn't even scream or act shocked when I walked in. She just looked at me with this pitying kindness that made my blood boil. It was such a pick-me move to act so calm and welcoming in the face of my rightful indignation. Elena had the absolute audacity to offer me a plate of the food she was making. Some organic, gluten-free rainbow bowl nonsense that I used to tell Mark we should eat. I looked at the plate and then at her, and I told her quite clearly that she was nothing more than a placeholder for the true mother of this house. I told her that she was just renting a life that I had spent a decade building, and that her energy was a poor imitation of mine. Mark didn't even have the masculine decency to defend my status as the mother of his children in that moment. Instead, he just stood up, took the plate from her hand, and looked at me with a coldness that felt like a spiritual severance. He didn't even yell, which was almost worse. He just pulled out his phone and started typing with a chilling efficiency. He told me right in front of the kids that I was trespassing and that I needed to leave his home immediately. I tried to remind him of our 10-year history and the karmic debt he owed me for the years I spent being his unleveled-up wife. He just looked at me and said, "The locksmith is on his way, Chloe, and the police will be next if you aren't gone in 5 minutes." I was humiliated as the man I'd manifested into success treated me like a common criminal in front of my own children. My daughter wouldn't even look at me. She just kept eating her organic dinner as if I were a ghost or a low-frequency glitch. I walked out of that house hearing the sound of their laughter resuming before I even reached my car, which felt like a shattering of my entire reality. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you called the woman living in a renovated mansion with your kids a placeholder while you went back to a studio with a hot plate. The lack of self-awareness is honestly breathtaking. Ops reply: a legal document or a new floor doesn't erase 10 years of soul history. She's filling a void that only I can truly occupy. Anonymous user 2 says Mark calling the locksmith while you were standing there is the ultimate boss move. He's literally locking your toxic energy out of his new life forever. Ops reply: he's just acting out of unhealed hurt and trying to punish me for leaving him when he was stagnant. He's clearly projecting. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I've been focusing heavily on digital manifestation and high-vibe social media presence. I've been posting a constant stream of healing quotes and main character reels, making sure to tag the locations where Mark and I used to go. I was hoping that he would see how much I've ascended and realize that his life with Elena is just a karmic distraction. However, I discovered that he has blocked me on everything, which is a classic sign of someone who is scared of their own truth. I had to use a Finsta account just to see what they were up to, and what I found felt like a literal energy vampire attack. A mutual friend who is clearly a spy for them confirmed that Mark is planning to propose to Elena during a trip next month. They aren't just going anywhere. They're going to the Maldives, which has been on my vision board since I was 22 years old. I used to show Mark photos of those overwater bungalows every single day, and he always told me we couldn't afford it. Now, suddenly, he has the provider funds to take his rebound on the luxury vacation of my dreams. It felt like a direct theft of my mental real estate and my manifestation efforts over the years. I couldn't let this misalignment happen without speaking my truth, so I created a burner account to send Elena a warning. I sent her a long, thoughtful DM explaining that Mark is a low-effort man who is just using her as a security blanket and that he'll never truly value her. I expected her to be rattled, to feel the shaking of her foundation, or at least to offer me some kind of feminine solidarity. Instead, she replied with a photo that felt like a vibrational punch to the gut. A close-up of a Cartier love bracelet on her wrist. She didn't even use many words, which was so disrespectful to the emotional labor I had put into my message. She just wrote, "He's only low effort with people he doesn't value. Thanks for stepping aside and clearing the path for us." I felt like my aura was being shredded by her blatant flexing of material wealth that should have been mine. It's clear she's incredibly insecure and needs to overcompensate with jewelry to hide the fact that she's just a secondary character in my story. The disrespect of her claiming that I stepped aside is a complete rewrite of the facts I left to find a provider, and she just stole the one I was, in the middle of upgrading. I spent the rest of the night cleansing my space with sage, but the negative energy from that DM was stuck in my fields. I can't believe the universe is allowing someone's surface level to enjoy the abundance that my vision boards created. It feels like a karmic imbalance that needs to be corrected by a major event before they actually make it to the Maldives. I'm currently scripting a new reality where Mark realizes his error before he puts a blood diamond on that woman's finger. My frequency is rising, and I know the climax of this storyline is coming soon despite their superficial happiness. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "He's only low effort with people he doesn't value." Damn. Elena didn't just burn you, she vaporized your entire high-value delusion with one sentence. Ops reply: she's clearly projecting her own insecurities. A truly secure woman wouldn't feel the need to flaunt luxury jewelry to a stranger. Anonymous user 2 says, "You literally trained Mark to be the man you wanted and then you gifted him to a woman who actually appreciated him. That's the boomerang of the century right there." Ops reply: "I am the prize in this scenario, and he's just giving my prize to a stranger to make himself feel healed from the loss of me." Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and the universe has finally delivered the climax I was waiting for, though it didn't land the way I scripted. I decided that the only way to break the spell Elena had over my family was to create a cinematic moment that Mark couldn't ignore. I looked up their flight details for the Maldives, which was surprisingly easy given how much they overshare their aesthetic lives online, and I headed to the airport. I wore my most expensive-looking outfit, a beige wool coat and silk scarf that screamed old money and effortless elegance. I planned to intercept them at the terminal, believing that seeing me in my highest form would trigger a soul recall in Mark and the kids. I had been manifesting this confrontation for weeks, convinced it would be the turning point where I was restored to my rightful place. When I spotted them near the priority check-in, which was another sting to my ego considering my own financial state, I felt a surge of main character energy. I didn't approach them with anger. I approached them with vulnerability, letting the tears flow authentically as I called out to my children. I told them that I was ready to come home and that our spiritual separation was finally over, expecting them to run into my arms like a reunion scene. Mark just stepped in front of them, his energy as cold and impenetrable as a diamond, looking at me with a mixture of disgust and exhaustion. He didn't even look triggered or emotional. He just looked like he was dealing with a technical difficulty that was delaying his luxury vacation. The shattering of my reality didn't come from Mark, though it came from my 12-year-old daughter, who I had always thought was my mini-me. She stepped out from behind Mark and she didn't look emotional or healed at all. She just looked mortified and angry. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. We are going on vacation with our family. Please just go away and leave us alone." I felt like the Matrix had finally collapsed around me, leaving me standing in a busy airport terminal in an old money outfit that felt like a costume. They didn't even wait for a response. They just turned their backs and walked through the priority security line, leaving me in the general population. I watched them disappear into the luxury side of the airport, realized that I wasn't the lead in a romance movie at all. I was just the villain in their success story. A low-frequency ghost from a past they had completely transcended. I drove back to my cramped studio, which now felt even smaller and less aesthetic than it did before the confrontation. I've spent the last few hours scrolling through Elena's stories, watching them live the life I scripted for myself on a private beach. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. I manifested the perfect life, the provider, the luxury, and the aesthetic family. I just forgot to manifest a version of myself that was worthy of actually being in it. And now I'm stuck in the credits while they live the feature film.